Hi, my name is Shannon, and welcome or welcome back. And today we're going to do a little Jane Austen video. Today I've been sitting at my desk preparing for a Jane Austen course that I'm actually taking starting next week. It's an online course, it's about 10 weeks long, and I've actually been looking forward to it for a really long time. It's going to cover analysis, background, Jane Austen's life, and then also doing deep reading into all of Jane Austen's published novels. It's not going to go into any of the juvenilia or the unfinished novels that I'm aware. So I thought it would be fun if I ranked my Jane Austen novels from favorite to least favorite before the course, and then do it again after the course to see if I feel any differently. I also thought it would be fun to do a ranking based upon how I liked the novels when I was younger. So I started reading Jane Austen when I was a teenager, and my thoughts of these novels have changed over the years. So I thought that this would just be a fun exercise. So I will give you my rankings as my teenage self, how I loved them as a teenager, my current rankings, and then in 10 weeks or so when I finish the course, I'll do a follow-up and see if my rankings have changed after that. But before we get started on my rankings, let me go over the editions that I own and will be using. So my special Jane Austen editions are the Penguin cloth-bound editions, and you can see them behind me here. So that white, starting with that white one right there, that's Jane Austen's Juvenilia. And then I have every Jane Austen Penguin cloth bound that they have released. So those are right there. Those basically stay on the shelves. I have read one or two of them. But the next set of Jane Austen books that I have that I absolutely love are these annotated editions. Absolutely fantastic. And these are annotated by David M. Shapard, or Shapard, I'm not exactly sure how to say that. And each published novel has its own edition. And what I absolutely love about these editions is that you have the text on one side, okay? And then you have the annotations on the other side. So there's no flipping to the back of the book when you see an annotation like you would with, like a Penguin, Black Spine, or even the Oxford World's Classics. You actually have to flip to the back to view the notes. You don't have to do that here. You literally read the text and then immediately the notes are right there. It's absolutely ingenious. And I wish I could find this type of annotations for all of my favorite novels. I have not been so lucky. I have been looking for something like this for the Bronte novels. If anybody knows where I can find that type of annotation, where text on one side, notes on the other, immediately facing, let me know, because I will definitely snap those up. So these so far have been my favorites to read because I have the notes right there. Now, obviously, if I'm just reading for fun, I will go back to the actual books there so that I'm not distracted by the notes. But if I'm really looking to just delve into the novels, I go to the annotated, and there's one for each published novel. I cannot recommend those enough. They are my favorites. But the editions that I'm actually going to be using for the course are the Oxford World Classics. So these I'm actually going to use so I can scribble in them. I actually started, I think it was Northanger Abbey, I actually started doing a little scribbling in here, and I kind of didn't like doing that. So I'm going to use these, the Oxford World Classics, for scribbling, for underlining, for doing my own annotations, and just basically, tearing these up. Not tearing as in tearing, but doing a lot of work in here. I'm really looking forward to that. So those are my 3 sets of Jane Austen novels. Okay, now to start ranking. So first we're going to do teenage Shannon's ratings, and I will just do it from 1 to 6, most favorite to least favorite. My favorite Jane Austen novel from my teenage years, Pride and Prejudice. And that's, I'm sure, no surprise to anyone. Pride and Prejudice is probably the most accessible of all of Jane Austen's novels. It's bright, it's witty, it's sparkling, it's accessible. And so I find that any teenager can definitely read that book and enjoy it. Number 2 is Sense and Sensibility. I mean, what teenager wouldn't love Sense and Sensibility? I mean, just Marianne completely falling apart after her heart gets broken. Any teenager can understand how that feels, you know, that first love and that first heartbreak, and you just are just so despondent and brokenhearted, and you're just listless and sluggish, and you don't know what to do with yourself, and your life is over, and you're very dramatic. So yes, I identified with Marianne as a brokenhearted teenager after having my heart broken with my first love. Number 3 was Persuasion. This was just such a lovely love story to me when I was a teenager. Two people who loved each other and then were separated and then found each other again. My teenage heart was just all for it. Number 4 was Mansfield Park. And again, another love story. You have, you know, poor cousin Fanny, who's just being treated so badly, and, you know, her only solace is her cousin Edmund, and she has to sit and wait for him to finally realize that the woman that he does love, Mary Crawford, was just, you know, not for him. Number 5 is Northanger Abbey. Northanger Abbey rates in the bottom because I didn't really read it that much, and I honestly didn't really pick up on how funny and satirical the book is. And it just, the love story was fine, but it wasn't as powerful as, say, Sense and Sensibility or Persuasion. And then coming up last at number 6 was Emma. I always disliked Emma. I just never read it. I read it once or twice, and I just found Emma to just be awful. She was like the original Mean Girls. And I just never enjoyed that book. And that scene with Mrs. Bates just always made me so uncomfortable. Even today, I kind of skip over it because I'm just so embarrassed for her and the fumble that she makes and the way that she treats Miss Bates. To me, that is just, and that is an important part of the book, and that is vital. But as a teenager, I just didn't get any of it. I just thought she was a jerk. And so I never enjoyed reading Emma. It was always at the bottom when I was a teenager. Next, let's do middle-aged Shannon's ratings. These are the ratings how I feel today for my Jane Austen novels. Number 1, Pride and Prejudice. That has not changed. It is still my favorite. And I do suspect it will remain my favorite. I mean, how can it not be? Like I said before, it's really her brightest novel. It is just witty and sparkling, and the pace is amazing, and the characters are amazing, and the storyline is great. It may not be her best written or her most mature, but it really is, in my opinion, the best Jane Austen novel. We'll see if that changes after this course. Number 2 is Persuasion, kicking Sense and Sensibility from my teenage years out of the number 2 spot. And this is because I realized that Jane Austen had matured as an author and matured as a person herself, whereas, you know, she wrote and experienced Pride and Prejudice when she was a young woman, and Persuasion is an older woman's story. Now, older in the Regency, a little bit different than older today. As you know, Anne Elliot in Persuasion is 28 years old, and so she's considered washed up spinster, never to marry, you know, yada, yada, yada. I do feel that Jane Austen was experiencing something when she wrote that late novel that technically was never really finished. She did pass away before it was officially finished. It was finished enough for it to be published, but I'm sure that some changes would have been made and tweaks made had she survived to have it published in her lifetime. Number 3, Northanger Abbey, moving up from number 5, one of my least read, to now in my top 3. And the reason for that is when I reread it recently, I actually caught how funny it is. I actually caught some of the jokes and the satire that she was giving us and how she was making fun of people. And you can tell it was written by a young author. So Northanger Abbey was, along with Sense and Sensibility, was written in her very younger years. Although Northanger Abbey wasn't published until she had already passed away, it was published along with Persuasion after her death. She did spend many years rewriting it to kind of come with the times. When she wrote it, it was the late 1700s and a lot of things had changed. So she did end up doing a lot of tweaks to it to sort of make it more relevant to the time. Number 4 is Emma. I know, you must be surprised. It goes from my absolute least favorite, going from number 6 to number 4. Well, upon a reread recently, I did see how well written Emma is. I still think that Emma is kind of an awful character, and though she does kind of redeem herself at the end, I just sometimes still can't get over the snobbishness of Emma, even though I do realize she does truly care about her friends. She just does not show it the right ways. But the writing in Emma really is so much better, and you can see how Jane has been honing her craft. Number 5 is Mansfield Park. It's moved down in the rankings for me because I realized that Fanny's just an insipid character and she just annoys me a lot of the time. As a teenager, I was focusing on the love story between her and Edmund, and then I realized the two of them really are just kind of meh. Fanny is just kind of insipid and inflexible, and sometimes I feel like she really needs to get over herself. I mean, the whole thing about the not performing in a play thing, I mean, just calm down. Same thing with Edmund. He just could not get out of his own way. He didn't know his ass from his elbow. So and the two of them as a couple no longer worked for me. So that's why it moved down. But Mansfield Park, I feel like Jane Austen was trying to make a point with Mansfield Park. It's slightly political. It is probably one of the more political of her novels. I mean, she deliberately names Mansfield Park, we think, after a certain British judge named Mansfield who knocked down some of the slavery laws in Britain. And she specifically mentions Antigua and how Sir Bertram actually leaves Britain to care for property that he has in Antigua. And we know what type of property that is. That is plantations full of enslaved people. And that money from the plantations is funding their lifestyle in Britain. That was very, very common at the time. None of Jane Austen's other novels reference any type of this that I can recall. When I go through the novels this time, I am going to specifically look out for that. But I'm pretty sure Mansfield Park is the only novel that appears to get slightly political. So even though I'm not on board with Fanny and Edmund anymore, I am on board with Mansfield Park because Jane, I hope, was trying to use this novel to make a statement. And coming in last at number 6 is Sense and Sensibility. Sense and Sensibility moved from number 2 to number 6. How does that happen? Well, I realized that it is just not as well written as some of her other novels. The stories are not as fully fleshed out as some of the other novels. It's not as bright and witty and sparkling as some of the others. And I realized that Edward is hardly even in the book, and he hardly even speaks. And so you really don't get the feeling that Eleanor and Edward really belong together. And the whole wrap-up of Marianne and Colonel Brandon is pretty unsatisfying. Basically, she's still heartbroken from Willoughby, and yet at the end of the story, it's like, well, time has passed. I guess I'll marry Colonel Brandon. I got nothing else going for me. And that's literally how it's wrapped up. In the adaptations, they do it a little bit differently. They basically show it as her actually falling in love with him. But in the book, it's really not this way. It's just basically wrapped up in a way that time passed and she was like, all right, whatevs. That's So that is why it moved down the rankings for me. It's just not the same as the other novels, either in storyline or in writing quality. So that is it. Those are my rankings from teenage Shannon and middle-aged Shannon. I'm really excited to do this course and see how I feel afterwards, after we go through the books and do analysis and learn more on background and Jane Austen's life and see what happens after. Some of my upcoming videos in May and June will include some wrap-ups of things that I've learned in the novels, but once the course is over, I will do a wrap-up of the course and update my rankings. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and apologies for the lighting situation going on here. It's a dark and gloomy day here in Massachusetts, and I just have been having some severe lighting issues. So I apologize for that, and if you stuck around this far, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.